Jake Murphy stood at the observation deck of the transport ship, watching the massive space station grow larger through the reinforced glass window. Kepler-7 was unlike anything he had ever seen before. The station stretched for miles in every direction with towers and domes that sparkled like jewels against the black of space. Ships from dozens of different worlds docked at various ports along its surface. Some vessels looked like metal birds, while others resembled floating crystals or organic creatures. The 34-year-old former Marine adjusted his formal diplomatic uniform and took a deep breath. Earth had waited 300 years for this moment. First contact with alien civilizations had happened decades ago, but this was different. This was humanity joining the Galactic Confederation as equals. Jake carried the hopes and dreams of 12 billion people on his shoulders. Lieutenant Amy Foster walked up beside him, carrying a thick datapad filled with cultural information. She had spent 2 years studying every known alien species in the Confederation. Her job was to make sure Jake did not accidentally offend anyone during the ceremony. Amy was nervous. Jake could see it in the way she kept checking her notes and adjusting her glasses. She had warned him repeatedly about the complexity of alien customs. Each species had different ways of showing respect. What seemed polite to humans might be deeply insulting to others. The Zeltharians were the most concerning. This ancient species viewed certain gestures and actions as sacred violations. Their religion dominated their entire culture. Breaking one of their taboos could destroy any chance of peaceful relations. Amy had made Jake practice the proper way to greet each delegation for hours. The transport ship docked with a soft vibration that ran through the floor. Jake gathered his diplomatic case while Amy organized her cultural reference materials. They walked together toward the airlock, where 2 other Earth representatives waited. The small human delegation looked tiny compared to what they would face inside the station. The airlock opened with a hiss of equalizing pressure. Jake stepped onto the station and immediately noticed the different atmosphere. The air felt thicker and carried strange scents from a dozen different worlds. The gravity was slightly lighter than Earth normal, making each step feel like a small bounce. Alien beings moved through the corridors around them. Jake saw his first live Krathen with their tall, thin bodies and large heads filled with complex, thinking organs. A group of 4-armed Nexarians discussed something in their musical language while gesturing with all their limbs at once. 2 massive Gorvax warriors stomped past, wearing ceremonial armor that clanked with each heavy step. Amy guided the human group through several corridors toward the main ceremonial hall. They passed viewing windows that showed the interior of the station. Gardens filled with plants from hundreds of worlds created a rainbow of colors. Artificial rivers flowed between different sections carrying water that glowed with bioluminescent organisms. The ceremonial hall was enormous. Jake estimated it could hold 10,000 beings, easily. Representatives from 7 different species filled the space. Each delegation had their own section decorated with symbols and colors from their home worlds. The noise level was incredible, as dozens of different languages mixed together in a constant hum of conversation. At the center of the hall stood a raised platform where the ceremony would take place. 7 ornate chairs waited for the leaders of each Confederation species. Jake noticed that an 8th chair had been added for the human representative. That chair would be his once Earth officially joined the Alliance. Amy pointed out the different delegations as they walked toward the human seating area. The Mundari delegation sat in perfect silence with their pale blue skin reflecting the overhead lights. Their large eyes seemed to take in everything around them without missing any detail. They were known for their peaceful nature and philosophical wisdom. The Dalmar representatives were busy with some kind of trade negotiation, even during the ceremony. Their short, stocky bodies moved quickly as they exchanged data tablets and made calculations. Jake had read that their entire culture revolved around commerce and resource management, but it was the Zeltharian delegation that drew his attention. They sat in perfect formation, wearing elaborate robes covered in religious symbols. Their leader, High Priest Vorthok, was an imposing figure with silver skin and eyes that seemed to glow with inner light. The Zeltharians had not moved or spoken since Jake entered the hall. They simply waited with an patience that spoke of centuries of ritual and tradition. Amy noticed Jake looking at the Zeltharians and touched his arm gently. She reminded him again about their cultural sensitivity. Any wrong gesture could be interpreted as a challenge to their religious beliefs. Jake nodded and tried to focus on the upcoming ceremony. A series of musical tones filled the hall, signaling the start of the formal proceedings. Jake took his position on the platform, while Amy and the other Earth representatives found their seats. The leaders of the 7 Confederation species rose from their chairs and began speaking in turn. Each leader welcomed humanity to the galactic community in their own language. Universal translators built into the hall converted their words into dozens of different languages simultaneously. Jake listened as species after species offered friendship and cooperation to Earth. When his turn came, Jake stepped forward to address the assembled beings. He had practiced this speech hundreds of times, but now facing thousands of alien eyes, he felt his heart racing. He began speaking about humanity, dreams of joining the galactic community and working together for peace and prosperity. The speech went well. Jake could see positive reactions from most of the delegations. The Krathan seemed particularly interested in his mentions of human scientific achievements. The Mundari nodded approvingly when he spoke about Earth's desire for peaceful cooperation. As Jake finished his formal remarks, he felt a wave of relief. The hardest part was over. Now came the traditional acknowledgement, where he would recognize each delegation in turn. Amy had drilled him on the proper way to greet each species without causing offense. Jake turned toward the Krathan delegation first and gave the slight bow that showed respect for their intellectual achievements. The Krathan leader responded with the traditional gesture of academic recognition. So far, so good. He moved through each delegation, carefully following Amy cultural instructions. The Mundari received the open palm gesture of peaceful intentions. The Gorvaks got the firm nod that acknowledged their warrior traditions. Each response from the alien leaders showed that Jake was performing the ceremony correctly. Finally, Jake turned toward the Zeltharian delegation. High Priest Vorthok watched him with those glowing eyes, showing no emotion. Jake remembered Amy's instructions perfectly. He was supposed to place his right hand over his heart and bow his head slightly. This would show respect for Zeltharian spiritual authority without claiming any religious connection himself. But as Jake began the gesture, something went wrong. The ceremonial platform was slightly higher than he had practiced on. As he raised his hand and began to bow, the angle was different than expected. His hand moved in a sweeping motion that continued longer than intended. The bow became deeper as he tried to compensate for the platform height. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Every Zeltharian in the hall rose to their feet as one. A sound like thunder rolled through their section as hundreds of beings began chanting in their ancient language. High Priest Vorthok pointed directly at Jake with both arms extended. His glowing eyes blazed with an intensity that made Jake step backward. Amy leaped from her seat, shouting that it was a mistake, but her voice was lost in the chaos. Zeltharian guards rushed toward the platform with weapons drawn. The other alien delegations began talking frantically among themselves, trying to understand what had happened. Jake stood frozen on the platform, not understanding what he had done wrong. The gesture had felt exactly like what Amy had taught him. But clearly something had gone terribly wrong. The Zeltharians were treating his greeting like a declaration of war. High Priest Vorthok began speaking in the ancient Zeltharian ceremonial language. The universal translators struggled with the archaic terms, but Jake caught enough to understand the severity of his situation. The priest was declaring him guilty of the most serious cultural violation possible. He had performed the curse of eternal suffering in front of the entire Confederation, Security forces from multiple species moved to surround the platform. Jake realized that his simple mistake had just destroyed humanity, chance of joining the galactic community. Worse than that, he was about to face alien justice for a crime he did not even know existed. Jake sat in the detention cell aboard Kepler-7, staring at the energy barrier that kept him trapped inside. The walls were made of some kind of metal that seemed to shift color depending on the angle he viewed it from. A small slot in the barrier allowed food and water to be passed through, but nothing else could enter or leave. 3 days had passed since his arrest during the diplomatic ceremony. Amy had been allowed to visit him once, but their conversation was monitored by guards who recorded every word. She had tried to explain that Jake's gesture was an honest mistake, but the aliens did not seem to care about human intentions. The Confederation legal system was unlike anything from Earth. Jake learned that he would face the Tribunal of 7 Worlds, where one judge from each member species would decide his fate. The trial would be broadcast across the galaxy, as an example of how the Confederation dealt with serious cultural violations. A Nexarian guard with 4 arms approached his cell carrying an official document. The guard spoke through the universal translator, explaining that Jake had been assigned a legal defender. The document contained information about someone named Quilth, who specialized in representing aliens. Accused of cultural crimes, Jake read through the legal papers, trying to understand the charges against him. The language was formal and filled with terms that had no equivalent in human law. He was accused of performing the gesture known as the Curse of Eternal Suffering in front of witnesses from multiple worlds. The crime carried a mandatory sentence of public execution if he was found guilty. The trial was scheduled to begin in 2 days. Jake would be moved to the main courtroom, where thousands of beings would watch as the tribunal decided whether he lived or died. The thought of facing execution for waving at someone seemed impossible, but the Confederation took cultural violations very seriously. On the morning of the trial, Jake was moved from his cell to a preparation room, where he met his defender for the first time. Quilth was a Nexarian, with pale green skin and 4 arms that moved independently of each other. 2 arms were arranging legal documents while the other 2 gestured as he spoke. His large eyes showed intelligence, but also resignation. Quilth explained that defending cultural violation cases was nearly impossible. The law was clear and simple. If someone performed a forbidden gesture, then they were guilty regardless of their intentions or knowledge. No defendant had ever successfully appealed a cultural violation charge in the 300-year history of the Confederation. The Nexarian lawyer went through the evidence that would be presented against Jake. Security cameras had recorded his gesture from 17 different angles. Computer analysis had confirmed that his hand movement and body position matched the forbidden curse exactly. Expert witnesses would testify about the religious significance of the violation. Jake asked if there was any way to argue that he had not known about the taboo. Quilth explained that ignorance was not a defense under Confederation law. All species were expected to learn about each other's customs before making contact. The fact that humans were new to the galaxy did not excuse the violation. Amy had been working frantically with legal experts on Earth trying to find some precedent that might help. But human law meant nothing in the Confederation courts. The trial would follow alien procedures and be judged by alien standards. Jake was facing justice in a system that had no concept of honest mistakes. The courtroom was the largest space Jake had ever seen. It reminded him of ancient Roman amphitheaters, but on a massive scale. Thousands of seats rose in tiers around a central area where the trial would take place. Representatives from dozens of worlds had come to watch humanity's first major legal proceeding. 7 enormous chairs dominated the front of the courtroom. Each chair was designed for a different alien species and decorated with symbols of their authority. The judges filed in wearing ceremonial robes that marked their positions as arbiters of galactic justice. Chief Justice Corveth of the ancient Valdran species took the central position. Jake was led to a defendant platform in the center of the courtroom. From there he could see the entire massive space filled with alien beings. Some looked similar to humans, while others were so strange that his mind had trouble processing their appearance. All of them were watching him with curiosity about how this human would face alien justice. The prosecution case began with Magistrate Yilthin, representing the Zeltharian government. The prosecutor was tall and imposing with silver skin that seemed to glow under the courtroom lights. His voice carried across the vast space without any need for amplification. Every word was carefully chosen to emphasize the severity of Jake's crime. Yilthin presented the security recordings of Jake's gesture from multiple angles. The holographic displays showed his hand movement in slow motion, making it easy to see how it matched the forbidden curse. Computer analysis confirmed that every aspect of the gesture was identical to the most serious insult in Zeltharian culture. Expert witnesses testified about the religious significance of the curse. Ancient Zeltharian priests explained how the gesture had been forbidden for over 2,000 years. They described the spiritual damage that such a violation could cause to their entire civilization. The testimony painted Jake as someone who had committed an act of cultural terrorism. Jake watched the evidence pile up against him, feeling helpless. Every piece of proof was accurate. He had performed the gesture exactly as the recordings showed. The fact that he had not intended to insult anyone seemed irrelevant to the court proceedings. Quilth tried to present a defense based on human ignorance of Zeltharian customs. He argued that Jake had been trying to show respect rather than cause offense. But the judges seemed uninterested in human intentions. The law was clear about the consequences of performing forbidden gestures. During a break in the proceedings, Jake spoke with Amy, who had been allowed to attend as an observer. She looked exhausted from days of trying to find some legal solution. Earth government had offered to recall Jake and punish him under human law, but the Confederation insisted on trying him themselves. Amy had discovered something interesting while researching Confederation legal history. In very rare cases, defendants had been allowed to represent themselves if they could prove they understood the law better than their assigned defender. It was a desperate option, but Jake was running out of alternatives. When the trial resumed, Jake stood and requested permission to dismiss his defender and represent himself. The request caused a stir throughout the courtroom. Chief Justice Corveth consulted with the other judges before allowing Jake to proceed. They seemed curious about what a human might say in his own defense. Jake spent that night in his cell, thinking about his strategy. Traditional legal arguments had already failed. The evidence against him was overwhelming, and the law allowed no exceptions. He needed something different, something that would make the alien judges see his gesture from a human perspective. He remembered his younger brother, Danny, back on Earth, who spent most of his time creating and sharing internet memes. Danny was always trying to explain to Jake how memes were more than just funny pictures. They were a way for humans to share complex ideas through simple images and references. Jake realized that his gesture problem was fundamentally about communication. The aliens had interpreted his movement according to their cultural understanding. But what if he could show them how humans communicated? What if he could demonstrate that the same gesture could mean completely different things depending on cultural context? The idea was crazy, but Jake had nothing left to lose. He spent the rest of the night planning a defense strategy that would either save his life or confirm his death sentence. Tomorrow, he would try to explain human meme culture to alien judges who had never heard of internet humor. As he finally fell asleep, Jake wondered if he was about to make legal history or simply provide entertainment for his own execution. Either way, he was determined to go down fighting in the most human way possible. Jake stood before the Tribunal of Seven Worlds, feeling the weight of thousands of alien eyes, watching his every movement. Chief Justice Corveth had granted his request to represent himself, but the ancient Valdrin looked skeptical about what a human could possibly say that had not already been covered by professional legal defenders. The courtroom was completely silent as Jake activated the holographic display system. Amy had managed to smuggle him access to Earth Internet archives through encrypted quantum communications. The data contained millions of examples of human meme culture, spanning several decades of Internet history. Jake began his defense with a simple statement that confused everyone in the courtroom. He explained that humans had developed a unique form of communication that used shared images and references to convey complex ideas. This communication method was called meme culture, and it was fundamental to understanding human social interaction. The alien judges looked puzzled as Jake displayed his first example. On the massive holographic screens appeared an image of a man looking back at a woman while his girlfriend pulled him forward. The image was labeled with text explaining different choices or temptations. Jake explained that humans called this the distracted boyfriend meme. Magistrate Yilfin objected that this had nothing to do with the cultural violation charges. But Chief Justice Corveth was intrigued by this strange human communication method. He allowed Jake to continue explaining how the same image could be used to represent hundreds of different concepts depending on what text was added. Jake showed how the distracted boyfriend format could represent choosing between old and new technologies, scientific theories, or even political ideas. The key point was that context determined meaning. The same visual elements could convey completely opposite messages, depending on how they were labeled and understood by the audience. The Krafan delegation began taking detailed notes. Their logical minds were fascinated by this systematic way of encoding multiple meanings into single images. Judge Thacken asked several questions about how humans determined which interpretation was correct in any given situation. Jake explained that human meme culture relied on shared cultural understanding. People who grew up with internet communication automatically understood the references and could decode the intended meanings. But someone from a different culture might misinterpret the images completely. Next, Jake displayed the famous "This is Fine Dog" meme, showing a cartoon dog sitting in a burning room, saying everything was fine. He explained how humans used this image to represent staying calm during disasters or pretending problems did not exist. The same dog image could be used seriously or sarcastically, depending on the situation. The Mundari delegation seemed particularly interested in this example. Their peaceful nature made them appreciate how humans used humor to cope with stressful situations. Judge Serena asked if all human communication involved these hidden meanings and references. Jake displayed dozens more examples, showing the incredible variety of human meme formats. The Galaxy Brain meme demonstrated how ideas evolved from simple to complex. The expanding brain format showed different levels of understanding or enlightenment. Each template provided a framework that humans could adapt to communicate about any topic. The Drake pointing meme captivated the alien judges. Jake explained how a human musician named Drake had become an unlikely philosophical template for expressing preferences and choices. The image of Drake rejecting one thing while approving another had become a universal way for humans to show approval or disapproval. Judge Corveth requested that Jake explain the cultural significance of using a celebrity image in this way. Jake described how human internet culture transformed random images into communication tools. The original context of the photograph was irrelevant. What mattered was how humans collectively agreed to use the image as a template for expression. The Gorvax warriors were intrigued when Jake showed them Chad versus Virgin memes. These images compared confident, successful people with awkward, unsuccessful ones. Jake explained how humans used exaggerated stereotypes to make points about behavior and social status. The memes were not meant to be taken literally but rather as commentary on different approaches to life. Jake could see that his meme presentations were having an unexpected effect on the courtroom. Alien beings who had never encountered human humor were beginning to understand how context shaped meaning. The same images could be interpreted in multiple ways depending on cultural background and shared references. The breakthrough moment came when Jake presented the Unite Humanity meme format. These images showed people from different backgrounds, coming together despite their differences. Jake explained how humans used humor and shared references to bridge cultural gaps and find common ground. He displayed examples of memes that brought together people from different countries, religions, and political beliefs. The common thread was humor that everyone could understand and appreciate. Memes had become a universal language that helped humans communicate across cultural barriers. Jake then made his crucial argument. He explained that his gesture during the diplomatic ceremony was fundamentally a human meme. The wave was humanity's most basic friendly greeting equivalent to the distracted boyfriend or Drake pointing templates. It was a simple gesture that carried positive meaning within human culture. Just as aliens might misinterpret human memes, humans could misinterpret alien gestures. The same physical movement could have completely different meanings depending on cultural context. Jake had been using human meme logic when he waved at the Zeltharian delegation. He was trying to communicate friendship and respect using the cultural template he understood. Amy watched from the observer section as Jake continued his explanation. She had been skeptical about using meme culture as a legal defense, but now she could see its effectiveness. The alien judges were beginning to understand that communication was more complex than they had realized. Jake displayed examples of how human gestures had evolved over time. Handshakes had replaced sword drawing to show peaceful intentions. Waves had developed from more formal salutes. Modern casual greetings were simplified versions of ancient ceremonial gestures. His wave to the Zeltharians was simply the latest evolution in human greeting behavior. The courtroom atmosphere had completely changed from the formal legal proceedings of the previous days. Alien delegates were discussing human meme culture with their neighbors. Some were even trying to create their own versions of popular meme formats adapted to their species. Particular characteristics. Magistrate Yilthin attempted to object that memes had nothing to do with the serious charges of cultural violation. But even he seemed curious about how these human communication methods worked. The prosecutor found himself asking questions about meme creation and distribution, rather than focusing on the legal case. Jake concluded his defense by arguing that his gesture represented humanity's greatest strength. Humans used humor and shared references to turn conflicts into understanding. They transformed misunderstandings into opportunities for connection. The same gesture that appeared threatening to Zeltharians actually demonstrated humanity's desire to build bridges across cultural differences. The defense presentation had taken most of the day. As Jake finished explaining his final memes, the courtroom buzzed with conversation in dozens of different languages. Alien beings were trying to understand and adapt human meme concepts to their own cultures. Chief Justice Corvith called for a recess so the tribunal could deliberate on this unprecedented defense. Jake had turned a simple cultural violation trial into a galactic education session about human communication methods. Whether this would save his life remained to be seen, but he had certainly given the alien judges something new to consider. The tribunal recess stretched into hours as alien judges struggled to understand the implications of Jake meme defense. Throughout Kepler-7 station, news of the unusual trial spread rapidly. Beings from dozens of worlds gathered around public viewing screens to watch recordings of the human explaining his strange communication methods. Amy used the break to monitor galactic communication networks through her diplomatic access codes. She discovered that human memes were already spreading across alien social media platforms. The Krathen had created logical variations of popular formats, while the Mundari were developing peaceful versions that promoted harmony and understanding. In the Dulmar commercial districts, traders were experimenting with stonks memes to represent profitable deals and market trends. The format of a strange human face, surrounded by mathematical symbols, somehow perfectly captured their enthusiasm for successful business ventures. Amy watched in amazement as alien economists began creating financial memes using Earth templates. Even more surprising was the reaction from younger members of various alien species. Zeltharian teenagers were secretly sharing modified versions of human memes through encrypted networks. They found humor in the cultural misunderstanding that had caused the trial and were creating their own jokes about the situation. The Gorvax military academies had adopted Chad versus Virgin memes to illustrate different warrior philosophies. Instructors used the exaggerated comparisons to teach young soldiers about confidence and proper battle attitudes. The meme format proved more effective than traditional lectures for communicating complex ideas about honor and courage. Jake spent the recess in a secure holding area where he could monitor the galactic reaction to his defense. He watched alien news broadcasts trying to explain human meme culture to audiences that had never encountered anything like it. Translators struggled with concepts like irony and sarcasm that were fundamental to internet humor. The most significant development came from the Nexarian academic institutions. Their scholars had begun serious analysis of human meme propagation and evolution. They treated internet culture as a form of accelerated social development worthy of detailed study. Research papers were already being published about the philosophical implications of shared reference communication. When the tribunal reconvened, the atmosphere in the courtroom had completely changed. Instead of a formal legal proceeding, it felt more like an academic conference. Alien delegates were actively discussing meme theory and sharing examples they had created during the break. Chief Justice Korvath called for order, but his own curiosity was evident. He began the session by asking Jake to clarify several points about meme creation and distribution. The ancient Valdrin was particularly interested in how humans decided which images became popular templates while others were forgotten. Jake explained that meme success depended on relatability and adaptability. The best templates could be applied to many different situations while remaining instantly recognizable. They needed to capture universal experiences or emotions that people from various backgrounds could understand and appreciate. Judge Thakin of the Krathen asked about the logical structure underlying meme formats. Jake demonstrated how expanding brain memes followed a clear progression from simple to complex ideas. The format provided a framework for presenting information in an organized way that made complex concepts easier to understand. The Mundari judge, Serena, was fascinated by wholesome memes that promoted positive feelings and relationships. Jake showed examples of formats that celebrated friendship, kindness, and personal growth. He explained how humans used humor to reinforce social bonds and encourage good behavior within their communities. Jake presented the "This is fine dog" meme again, but this time he showed how it had evolved over several years of internet use. The original comic had been adapted to represent everything from personal problems to global crises. Each variation maintained the core message while applying it to new situations. The Gorvax Judge Brutak requested more examples of memes related to strength and achievement. Jake showed motivational formats that encouraged people to overcome challenges and pursue their goals. He demonstrated how humans used humor to make difficult concepts more approachable and inspiring. But the real breakthrough came when Jake introduced the concept of meta-memes. These were jokes about memes themselves, representing a higher level of cultural self-awareness. The alien judges were amazed that humans had developed humor about their own humor, creating endless, recursive layers of meaning. Magistrate Yult, who had been prosecuting the case, found himself asking questions about Zeltharian representation in human meme culture. Jake admitted that Earth's internet contained very few references to alien species since first contact was relatively recent. But he suggested that galactic meme sharing could help all species understand each other better. The Drake-pointing meme continued to fascinate the judges. Jake explained how the format had become so versatile that humans used it to express preferences about almost any topic. The image of Drake rejecting and approving things had transcended its original context to become a pure communication tool. Amy noticed that even High Priest Vorthok was paying close attention to the meme explanations. The Zeltharian religious leader who had originally demanded Jake's execution was now leaning forward to better see the holographic displays. His expression had shifted from anger to curiosity about these strange human cultural practices. Jake demonstrated how memes served as social commentary, allowing humans to discuss serious topics through humor. Political memes helped people process complex issues, while relationship memes provided ways to talk about personal experiences. The formats created safe spaces for discussing difficult subjects. The courtroom had become an impromptu classroom, where thousands of alien beings learned about human internet culture. Jake showed how memes spread across different human societies, adapting to local contexts while maintaining their core messages. The same templates worked in dozens of human languages and cultures. Judge Corvith asked about the educational potential of meme formats. Jake explained how teachers had begun using popular templates to make lessons more engaging for students. Complex scientific concepts became easier to understand when presented through familiar meme structures that students already knew and enjoyed. The Dolmer delegate representing trade interests wanted to know about the economic impact of meme culture. Jake described how human businesses had learned to use meme marketing to connect with younger consumers. The shared references created immediate understanding and emotional connections between brands and customers. Jake then presented his most important argument. He showed how memes had helped humans overcome cultural conflicts throughout their recent history. Internet humor had bridged divides between different countries, religions, and political groups. Shared laughter created bonds that transcended traditional barriers. He displayed examples of international meme exchanges, where people from different human cultures collaborated on humor projects. Language barriers became less important when communication relied on visual templates and shared references. Memes had become humanity first, truly global language. The alien judges began to understand that Jake's gesture during the diplomatic ceremony represented this same bridge-building impulse. Humans instinctively tried to create connections through shared experiences and references. His wave was an attempt to establish the kind of positive relationship that memes fostered within human culture. Amy watched as the trial transformed from a legal proceeding into a cultural exchange. Alien beings were not just learning about human memes, they were beginning to create their own versions adapted to their species, particular characteristics, and concerns. The courtroom had become a laboratory for interspecies communication. As Jake concluded his expanded presentation about meme culture, the alien judges faced an unprecedented situation. They had come to judge a simple cultural violation, but instead discovered an entirely new form of communication that might revolutionize how different species interacted with each other across the galaxy. Chief Justice Corvith called for another recess, as the 7 judges retreated to their private chambers to deliberate on the most unusual case in Confederation legal history. The ancient Valdrin had presided over thousands of trials, but never encountered a defense based on internet humor and cultural memes. Throughout the station, alien beings continued experimenting with human meme formats. Amy monitored the galactic networks, watching as the trial became the most viewed event in recent memory. Beings from hundreds of worlds were creating their own versions of popular memes adapted to their specific cultures and experiences. The Krathan scientific community had embraced brain expansion memes to illustrate their research methodologies. Their logical minds appreciated the clear progression from simple to complex ideas. Academic papers were being published using meme formats to explain theoretical concepts that had previously required lengthy technical descriptions. In the territories, peaceful memes promoting harmony and understanding were spreading rapidly through their communication networks. The gentle aliens found that humor helped them express concepts about conflict resolution and social cooperation more effectively than traditional diplomatic language. The Gorvax military had officially adopted several meme formats for training. purposes. Drill instructors discovered that Chad versus Virgin comparisons motivated recruits more effectively than traditional methods. Warrior culture embraced the exaggerated stereotypes as tools for building confidence and esprit de corps. Even the isolationist Dulmer had begun incorporating stonks memes into their commercial communications. The strange human face celebrating financial success perfectly captured their enthusiasm for profitable ventures. Traders across their territory were using the format to announce successful deals and market predictions. But the most significant development was happening within the Zeltharian delegation itself. High Priest Vorthok was meeting privately with younger members of his species, who had been secretly sharing memes since the trial began. The religious leader was struggling to understand how his people had so quickly embraced this foreign form of humor. Jake waited in his holding cell, watching news coverage of the global meme explosion his trial had triggered. Reporters from dozens of worlds were trying to explain human internet culture to audiences that had never encountered anything similar. The coverage ranged from academic analysis to entertainment speculation about what this meant for the galaxy. Amy received updates from Earth where the government was frantically trying to understand the complications of their diplomat accidentally starting a galactic cultural revolution. Human internet companies were being contacted by alien governments, wanting to establish official meme-sharing protocols. When the tribunal reconvened hours later, the courtroom atmosphere was unlike anything seen in Confederation legal history. Instead of formal legal observers, the audience now included cultural researchers, anthropologists, and communication specialists from across the galaxy. Chief Justice Corvith stood to address the packed courtroom. His ancient voice carried clearly through the vast space as he began explaining the tribunal decision. The 7 judges had reached consensus, but their verdict would establish precedents that would affect galactic law for generations. The tribunal found Jake technically guilty of performing the gesture that violated Zeltharian cultural taboos. The evidence was clear and undisputed. Security recordings confirmed that his hand movement and body position matched the forbidden curse exactly as the prosecution had demonstrated. However, the judges also found that the context of the violation was fundamentally different from anything previously considered under Confederation law. Jake had not intended to insult or threaten anyone. His gesture represented humanity's natural impulse to communicate and connect with others through shared experiences. Judge Thakin of the Krathen explained the logical analysis that had influenced their decision. The tribunal recognized that the same physical action could carry completely different meanings depending on cultural context. Human wave gestures and Zeltharian religious curses were identical in form, but opposite in intent. Judge Serena of the Mundari spoke about the peaceful intentions behind Jake's actions. His meme defense had demonstrated that humans used humor and shared references to build bridges between different groups. The gesture that seemed threatening was actually an attempt to establish positive relationships. The Gorvax judge Brutak acknowledged that Jake had shown courage in defending himself using unfamiliar methods. His willingness to stand before alien judges and explain human culture demonstrated the warrior spirit that his species respected. The defense had been unconventional, but effective. Judge Corvith announced the tribunal sentence. Instead of execution, Jake would serve as Humanity First Cultural Ambassador of Memetic Arts. This newly created position would involve teaching alien species about human communication methods and helping develop interspecies humor protocols. The sentence included establishing a Department of Interspecies Humor within the Confederation government. Jake would serve as its first director, working with representatives from all member species to develop meme-based communication standards. His accidental crime had become the foundation for a new form of diplomatic exchange. Amy felt tears of relief as she watched Jake's reaction to the unprecedented verdict. He had not only escaped execution but had been given an official role in galactic government. His knowledge of human internet culture had transformed from a legal liability into a valuable diplomatic asset. High Priest Vorthok surprised everyone by requesting permission to address the tribunal. The Zeltharian religious leader stood slowly and spoke in formal tones about his species' reaction to the trial. He admitted that many young Zeltharians had embraced human meme culture, despite their elders' concerns. The priest announced that the Zeltharian Council had decided to study humor as a form of cultural exchange. They recognized that different species could express respect and friendship in ways that seemed strange, or even offensive to outsiders. Understanding required effort from all sides. Jake was officially sworn in as cultural ambassador while still standing in the defendant dock. His first act was to propose a galactic meme-sharing network where all species could contribute their own humor formats and learn from others. The project would help prevent future cultural misunderstandings. The Confederation Council voted unanimously to grant Earth full membership status effective immediately. Humanity's unique approach to communication through shared humor had proven valuable enough to fast-track their application. Jake's accidental gesture had accomplished what years of traditional diplomacy might not have achieved. Amy was appointed as Earth's first official diplomatic representative to the Confederation. Her role would involve working with Jake to establish formal protocols for human-alien cultural exchange. The partnership between traditional diplomacy and meme-based communication promised to revolutionize interspecies relations. As the trial concluded, alien delegates began approaching Jake to discuss collaboration opportunities. The Krathan wanted to study meme logic structures. The Mundari hoped to develop peaceful humor formats. Even the Gorvaks were interested in strength-based memes for military applications. Jake's final act in the courtroom was to demonstrate the concept of RIP to the assembled alien judges. He explained how humans used surprise musical references to create shared experiences and gentle pranks. The concept of humor based on unexpected connections fascinated the aliens. The trial that had begun with Jake facing execution for a cultural violation ended with him teaching alien judges about internet humor traditions. His accidental crime had become humanity's greatest diplomatic success. The galaxy would never be the same. As Jake left the courtroom surrounded by alien cultural researchers and communication specialists, Amy reflected on how unpredictable diplomacy could be. Sometimes the greatest breakthroughs came not from carefully planned strategies, but from honest mistakes that revealed new possibilities. Earth had joined the galactic community, not through military strength or economic power, but through the universal language of humor and shared understanding. Jake Murphy had proven that sometimes the best way to avoid conflict was simply to help everyone learn to laugh together.